Morning.
Hello there.
Thank you, Team Beam.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you brought your own crowd. Thank you for being here.
It's a pleasure. Nice way to start the day.
Well, I think for me, I'm a big fan of coffee and cocktails, and so to speak to somebody in the alcohol category is fantastic, and there's back-to-back today for the category, folks after us, so that makes it special.
We don't talk about them.
Well, I didn't mention their name. I just said they're here.
Good guys.
Yes. So today I just wanted to give everybody a little bit of background on you, who you are. And so the way I like to do these, if you've ever heard me do a fireside chat, is like ask about you, not just you and your job. So
Perfect. Where do we start?
we start at the beginning. Where are you from originally?
I've grown up in London, northwest London, and lived there my whole life. I'm about to move to New York, but so far, London my whole life.
That's amazing. And when you were there, did you have a first job as a kid?
I did. When I was younger, I worked for my neighbor who was like an estate agent. At the time, it was like photocopying and helping him do some stuff with emails. But with hindsight, it was an ECRM strategy. And I really helped him transition to like a digital future. So started early.
Yeah, that marketing career started very
Exactly.
early. Well, that leads to this next question. So when you were doing that, you're hitting an email for the very first time. Did you learn anything back in those early days that inspired you to go into marketing today? Or was that just like...
I think I learned pretty early that I liked communicating with people. And that's always been the heart of marketing to me. And I used to be a more general marketer. I've ended up being very like specialist in media. But for me, it's always like the consumer, the people you're talking to, the connection you're making. And back then, it seemed like natural that we were printing all this stuff out, pages and pages, and posting it out. And I was like, why don't we just email this to people? Made my job a lot easier. Made their lives a little bit easier, I hope.
Yeah, as a kid, licking envelopes isn't all that fun, so...
No, but I saved the planet by printing less as well. So it was, sustainability. We started hard.
Well done, well done. So we're at Cannes. You were here last year. Talked a little bit about your career. Before we get into like what's been happening with you in your role, being back at Cannes this year, what's the one topic that's the buzzy topic that you don't want to talk about?
I mean, luckily, I think the people before us did a great job of covering off those two letters that I know very little about. So if you came for generative AI, fabulous session before us, I don't have the answers. But no, like last year, I was like 1 or 2 months into my job here on my own. This year, we're back. We've built a bit of a mini teams, 5 or 6 of us here. So I've got a squad cheering me on. And yeah, so it's different. But I think as much as we've heard those two letters a little bit this year, next year, it's just going to be everywhere.
It will be crazy. I've actually created a little bit of a drinking game. If we're talking and you put the two letters together, you have to take a sip, likely rosé, since we're here. But I think that, you mentioned being here, you have your new team, and when I saw you talk last year, you're kind of talking about the vision. You were brand new in the team, and then in our prep, you shared what you're doing kind of philosophically that's unique. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't know Beam Suntory, we're like a premium spirits brand, like Jim Beam, Maker's Mark, some of the Lefroy Scotch brands, and then the Suntory, which is some of the finest whiskey in the world, if I say so myself.
Yamazaki.
FYI, you can find it on the Quasette, so go look. And Suntory is a much, much wider company in Japan. And we're in a company as a journey really to being more premium. The unusual thing I learned when I joined my company is like we sell every single drop of Maker's Mark, every single drop of Suntory whiskey that we make. We haven't got any more to sell. Our job as marketers hasn't been to sell more. It's been to work out how we premiumize it, how we get people to pay more, how we get people to buy into like special editions or limited editions. And also we have, as a business, been making more. Takes a while, at least 4 or 5 years for bourbon, sometimes 10 years for whiskey. But that's coming on board, and that's why we as a company are saying, and to be honest, we have been very Japan and US focused, and we're trying to become a more truly global platform, truly global brand, and really thinking about premiumization. And then when we look at our media, I think we have a sort of a guiding light, which is we want like the quality and the importance of our media to be as good as the quality of our products. Like as a business, and I did used to, a few years ago, work for another alcohol company, great marketers, great company, but I've never worked for a business that is so passionate and puts so much attention into quality of its product. And we have this like kind of quality mindset that I think sometimes if you work in like a quality team in a big CPG company, your job is to make sure that everything is like the same quality. In our business, our quality team's job is always to make that quality higher. And that's kind of what we've tasked ourselves with in media, is in terms of like, if we're going to try and move our product, move our consumers in that direction, how does our media also move in that direction?
Is there some sort of best practice or thing as you've looked at that, building that, or measure even of how you're showing that you're making that possible and that is actually happening?
It's a big question, actually, how you measure the quality of media. In fact, the WFA launched just about a month ago, this new WFA Media Charter, and one of the principles of it was really about responsible media. And I think that the heart of that was, for many years we've talked about brand safety, we've talked about viewability, we've talked about kind of avoiding like the worst parts of the internet. We do an okay job of that as an industry. Though if anyone heard the new ANA transparency report, it showed that like the average client was still ending up on like 40,000 websites, even when they thought they were ending up on like 5,000. So we haven't cracked that. I think our mindset shift is not just avoid the bad, but actually the best way of avoiding the bad is to really chase and go after the good. To really think about like, what do I want to what is my media dollars investing in that creates a media ecosystem of the future, that creates good brand experiences, that creates places my ads want to be. Because another thing the ANA study showed up is that about 20% or something of media is going to these made-for-advertising websites, like, where they're just literally clickbait, they're just pooling in content for other people. They tick all your boxes. They're like highly viewable, great attention. So you think you're buying good, but you're really not. So for us, there's viewability. We're starting to look at attention, but all of those basic metrics need a layer of like quality of like, what are these platforms? Where are we landing? And that isn't easy. And we're looking at tools and partners and manual ways of doing it, but it just needs a bit of conscious thought and effort.
Yeah, I think that the next question is obviously, well, how do you do that, right? But
you hire a great team and ask them.
And then you get them to do it, figure it out. So you talked about attention. Attention is another topic at Cannes this year that's very big. We are partners with Lumen. They do really great things. We're working with Adelaide. Have you guys tackled that yet as a brand?
We have a little bit. Definitely, Karen Nelson Field and the stuff Adelaide is doing. Is that Adelaide? No, that's someone else, isn't it? But she does great work in attention as well. We are looking at that. I think the challenge for us is that our markets are in very different places. So our US market, we are definitely going, we're all in. We're going like, how do we do this? How do we take it to the next level? We start talking to them about conscious media, and they're like, well, we're already doing this. We're already doing this. We're already doing this. So our challenge as a team is how do we really elevate that? And then we have markets where, if we're honest, we are less mature. We've had less consistency. Maybe we've only recently started like using some of the basic verification tools and things. But yeah, I think attention is really interesting. I think attention is an interesting challenge as a media person, because there's stuff that we can do in the world of media to get attention. But there's also a lot of what gets great attention is the content and the other side of what you put out there. And I think that's the sort of the balance we're trying to find. How do you evaluate attention in platforms when, yes, your media is part of that, but it's also a challenge back to our brand teams or creative partners we can work with who can help us get to great content solutions. Because media buys you the first snap of people's attention, but actually creative that people want to stick around for gets you the rest.
I mean, you couldn't have said that last part better.
What do you do again?
As a creatively focused company, I find that the Magnum research around ad effectiveness and media effectiveness, 62% of a campaign success comes from creative. So are you guys doing anything in this world of quality, or do you have a point of view about creative when it comes to inclusivity and diversity that you can share? Because I know we talked a little bit about that.
We were talking earlier. I have a side hustle, so as well as leading media at Suntory, I'm also a World Federation of Advertisers Diversity and Inclusion Ambassador. And obviously D&I is often talking about like the makeup of our industry, which needs a lot of work, needs a lot of change. But we're also talking about the makeup as a communications industry, as an industry that puts stuff out in the world. We'll talk about the responsibility we have to put better stuff out into the world. And so that is definitely a big part of what we're trying to embrace, starting to embrace. I think in the US, our teams have historically done multicultural marketing and things like that, which I feel is a step in the right direction, but can sometimes bucket communities. What you really want to do is truly inclusive marketing across everything you do. And naturally, when you start thinking about that, you think about content, the stories you're telling, the people you're showing. But actually, from a media perspective, it's like hugely, hugely important. And it's great this year to see like Group Black and some of these other fantastic partners here in Cannes alongside the Metas and whatever of the world, because those partners are really, really important to us in terms of not just reaching consumers, because I think you can reach consumers a million different ways, but reaching them in environments where people really pay attention, are really passionate. And I think it brings it back to attention, because we've definitely seen, and I used to work at GSK, now Haleon, and they've done a lot of work in this space as well, showing that actually when you show culturally relevant creative in some of those culturally nuanced platforms, you just get more attention. People they're there to read, they're there to actually pay attention and read, and you're part of that story. So yeah, I think there's a big win-win there. And yeah, I had a bit of time off between the last job and this job, and we got 20 plus members of the World Federation of Advertisers to talk to us about how they thought we could do better inclusive marketing. And we wrote a book called Inclusive Marketing, now available on Amazon. Thank you. So, okay.
With a few copies.
I have some copies here. I'll just give them out to anyone who wants one. Yeah.
Copy. Unless you work on the team, you're probably not eligible.
Some of them have one already.
Well, it's really interesting you bring up the performance that comes along with creative when it has the person like me in it. I was on the Croisette last night talking to creative directors, and we're full. We have a street full of them. And it's just interesting to hear their perspective as to, hey, it's a lot of work. You create 6 versions of a campaign with the different heroes within that creative. Is creative a thing, even, I know you're in media, right? You're responsible for media. But when you think about creative and creative variation, do you guys have that kind of approach, something that you're applying today?
I think it's what we're trying to get to. I mean, it's not world-breaking. Many companies do it, but great creative is often media first. You've got to think, where is this creative landing? What channel is this going to land on? And I think that's a big mindset we're changing. We have big global brand house teams creating content for the whole world. That's a tough job to think about relevance, etc. And we're challenging them to say, where actually are we running this? Where's your consumer? Where's it going to appear? And making sure we're producing creative that will work in those environments. And of course, nowadays there are, and we've spoken to people this week, there are ways of testing, moving much, much faster and seeing which of these creatives is emotionally resonating. And so I think we want to get to a point where our brand house teams aren't just creating the right assets to fit a plan, but several assets for each box so that each asset can kind of jostle over the place and see who wins. But that takes a journey in a global business, and we're working on that. But I think it's important. I work in the media team, so I think media is more important. But I think media is a connection to the consumer. It's a connection to your audience. It's an understanding. We bring a lot of insight into who we want to talk to. We're doing a lot of work on search at the moment, which I never thought I'd be quite so fascinated by. But honestly, search is a really interesting place for understanding what your consumer is thinking about and caring about. The questions they ask, in relation to bourbon, we have an idea of what we think is important and cool and trending in our category, but actually consumers are asking this, and this,
They're telling you if you're listening, right?
Yeah, exactly. They keep asking if it's gluten-free, which is a good question. I'm celiac myself, so I think we should know, but it is. If you
now you know.
pretty much all alcohol, by the time you distill it, it's gluten-free, but some alcohols, increasingly alcohols, like to say that on the label as kind of a USP, but beer is not. If you're avoiding gluten, avoid beer.
Pro tip. I think we would be remiss, so I didn't realize that you're a Micmac client, so I'm going to give a shout out to our partners at Micmac. Shoppable creative is something that's big, and I don't think like even me, that has a partnership with Mick Because like alcohol wouldn't exactly be the brand that I would think would have shoppable. Can you tell us anything about your partnership?
I mean, depending on where in the world you live, that's very different. So if you know anything about the US liquor market, for instance, there's this quite complicated 3-tier system. There's a lot of rules based on like us as a producer and distributor of alcohol, and like who's allowed to advertise it, who's allowed to sell it. You have to have layers that varies state by state. But actually, why a platform like Micmac, as a result, ends up being quite a useful place for us. And if you don't know it, it's kind of a place where your consumers can pick the place they want to go. Like they can pick the store they want to get it. So those kind of intermediaries are great for us. And we do increasingly want to think of like full funnel marketing, of like how we truly move people down that funnel, how internally we bring our marketing and our sales teams together, but ultimately how in the communications we put out there. And we kind of do want to make nearly all of our digital media ultimately possibly leading to that kind of shoppable point. We don't expect the majority of our consumers will. Like the majority of consumers will still go into a bar, or they will go in and order it in a shop or in Walmart or wherever they happen to shop. But we wanted to make it so people can, and platforms like that, you know, we work with like Drizzly and other people as well, where you can, you know, find intermediaries, local shops and things who will bring it to you. But we're like a premium spirits business, so we're trying to move to where we are selling, you know, we talk about bottles that cost like at least $50, at least $100. It's actually an interesting space from an e-commerce perspective. You know, outside of the US, like we have a really interesting like Lefroy direct-to-consumer business. They launch every year. They launch like a special edition Cardish. I can never quite say it. It's a Celtic word, and it's sold out this year. After one, we sent one email to the Friends of Lefroy fan community, and it's sold out. And for us, we're not necessarily trying to sell. We're not trying to be like huge mass volume. We're trying to be like really good premium spirits. So for us, that journey into like a more of a direct connection with our consumer. This year, we're celebrating the 100th anniversary of the House of Suntory, the founding house of Japanese whiskey. And they're also now starting more of a kind of like CRM. It comes back to my first job, really. We're just bringing it back to CRM. But for us,
I do that for a reason. It works.
It's almost like we rehearsed that. But no, that like direct contact with our consumers. And we don't need to have tens of millions of people in the House of Suntory email distribution list. We need the right several thousand who want to know about new limited editions, who want to find out what the distillers are up to. So that's a really interesting space for us. And then platforms like Micmac help us when a consumer is there and they see our advert. Hopefully they like our brand. Hopefully they like our creative. And if they want to buy it now, they can.
Perfect. Well, we're coming to the end. Goes by really quickly. So I want to know, as somebody who's worked in spirits for a time, what's your favorite cocktail?
I have become a bourbon drinker since joining the business. Basil Hayden, which is it's part of the Jim Beam family, but I would say it's top of the tree. And I would do it in a whiskey sour, which is kind of just adding sugar to whiskey. But
I was going to say, do you want to break down that recipe for everybody?
What's a whiskey? A whiskey sour it's whiskey, and it's like lemon juice, and it's sugar syrup, and if you want a really good one, it's egg white. You're shaking it up, and you get that good froth on the top. And that for me is a perfect drink. Nice, you can drink it slowly. Sweet, delicious. Basil Hayden, the world's best bourbon. Not proven, but I believe it.
From your point of view.
From my point of view.
Serve it in the coupe, and it makes it so much better.
You'll struggle to find Basil Hayden here, unfortunately, but
shame.
We'll maybe next year.
I think I did see Roku Gin, which is actually
phenomenal gin.
One of my favorite spirits you guys sell.
Thank you very
gin
much.
Martini. So
we're in France. Courvoisier, our cognac, goes great in a gala, which is just it's a two part of cognac and then 3 part of Sicilian lemonade. Fever Tree would be our preferred brand if you wanted to find that out.
Plug. Well, I really appreciate you coming in and spending time with us. If we have a minute for questions, anyone have any questions?
Morning.
Morning. So I've been listening to all these talks for the last 2 days, and everybody's talking like Gen Z, trying to chase Gen Z. And now I'm hearing your talk when you're talking like $100 bottles of premium liquor. So I'm wondering how your mix of channels looks, because I'm guessing it's a little bit different. Specifically in terms of like social versus search versus programmatic. It might be different than many, but might be not.
Yeah, I mean, our companies. I mean, we have Jim Beam as well, which you can get for like $20, less than $20 a bottle. So we have that, and then we also have a big business in what we would call ready-to-drink spirits, like the cans or like seltzers and things like that. So it definitely does. But the House of Suntory traditionally has not done much advertising. They've been like, we sell every drop. Why would we bother? So their channel mix is like nothing. And this year that they celebrated 100th year, which was part of the reason. But we've also challenged them like, people who know whiskey, kind of when you tell them you work for Suntory, they go, oh yeah, that's good. But we kind of want people who don't know whiskey to also know that like Suntory whiskey is the best in the world. So yeah, we do look at premium spaces. But yeah, so for Suntory whiskey, we're probably not throwing it out there onto some like long tail programmatic thing. Absolutely not. We're putting it like, they've done a fantastic piece of work with Keanu Reeves and Sophia Coppola. And you want to put that in video environments where people are going to pay attention. But yeah, then we have like Jim Beam. We just launched a whole new Jim Beam campaign. Massively associated stuff with like sports. So there's a lot of TV. There's a lot of traditional TV behind Jim Beam. There's a lot of like middle of America consumers. We're moving that brand forward. So absolutely, I think actually one of the great things our team is doing, and Erin on my team is now leading our global media strategy, is looking at our brands and saying, how do we think really differently about our brands? How do we make sure we're not just doing a reach and frequency plan for every different one? What makes it work on different channels? That's one of the things I love about our company. Like the portfolio is insanely broad, from like super mass market to launching. We launched a new whiskey last month called Ardre, which we're trying to tell a tiny amount of this year. We're really just trying to get it into the right bars in the right cities just to start that off. It's fascinating from a media perspective to do some of those challenges, and really like we are increasingly looking at like a city strategy as well. Like we don't need to reach every country, we don't need to reach every market. Like where are the cities you want to show up? But yeah, where do you work?
So I started a company 2 years ago. We have a platform that brands like yours should be using.
There we go. Just chat to him later. Any other questions? Well, why am I hosting now?
I don't know, but we loved having you. So thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.